All right, let's get started, and I'm sure more people will join while I'm doing the intro here. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Didier. I'm the tech lead for the HP developer community, and this is October Munch Learn, and I'm very pleased to have with me Amber and Chase from HPE. And the discussion for today is the open source advantage and exploring machine learning through thought leadership. So before I hand over to Amber and Chase, let me just go through a couple of housekeeping items with the developer community. If you're familiar with you might not be familiar with our community, so let me give you a few hints here. We run this program called Munch Learn, which is kind of a thought leadership, vendor agnostic type of talk, and we try to have it on a monthly basis. I have to admit that I skipped a couple of months during the summer, but we're back and we have a topic for November. This is going to be a topic on neural network inference and done by Hannah and Lindsay from HP as well. We also have another type of talk called the meetups. And the meetups is a little more in detail about a given project, open source or not. And we have two topics coming up, one for next week on October 25. And this is going to be about containers and Podman. And this is actually delivered by Red Hat. And we have also a topic for late November. We moved a little bit the date to cope with Thanksgiving. November 29 is another talk, another meetup from our GreenLake for Private Cloud Enterprise team. They're going to be talking about continuous deployment with GreenLake for Private Cloud Enterprise. So you can join those. My colleagues, Fred and Denis, I think, are putting the links in the Q&A. You can use the Q&A to ask questions to our speakers. We also have a chat window open. You can start discussions there. We prefer that you keep the question in the Q&A. It's easier to track what we have answered and what we have not. Back to the community, in addition to talks, we also have something else that we would like to present to you called the workshops, and we call them the workshops on demand. And this is a catalog of workshops. We have about 33 workshops right now in the catalog. The workshops are using Jupyter notebooks as a delivery mechanism and user experience. They are available to anyone over the internet 24/7. And you can give it a try. We have workshops on programming Rust, programming Python, but also on some HPE products. We also have 101 for Kubernetes, 101 for Docker. So there are great ways to learn new things. And if you look on our website, you'll find them located under the Skill Up section, which is something that typically developers like to use for learning new stuff. This is a community, so we'd be happy if not only you join, but also if you contribute. So if you want to invite people to our talks, remember these are open to anyone. So you can invite customer, partners, colleagues, university, students, anyone you think would be interested in a particular talk, feel free to invite. We send a monthly newsletter. You can sign up for that, and you can invite others to sign up for this. It's just a way to not miss any events or not miss any interesting blogs that we have had during the previous months. We have a dedicated Slack workspace that you can use to ask questions on anything developer about any product within HPE. So you can take a look there. There's a Slack sign-up page on our website to join that Slack and start engaging in conversation. If you're more on the Twitter X side, you can also join us and follow us on Twitter. And if you're an SME or subject matter expert for a given technology, you can contribute through the form of a blog. So we have a blog section. This is entirely open source. So you can submit a new blog to us. We'll receive that as a GitHub pull request, pretty much tools that developers are very familiar with. So you can contribute a blog, and we'll be happy to review, provide editorial and technical review for you, and then publish it in, I would say, a couple of days or maximum 1 week, if there is not too much on our shoulder at this point in time. You can also reach out to us to deliver one of these meetup or Munch Learn, or to participate to events with us. That's also possible. Finally, if you're really a subject matter expert and you think we have a gap on that technology in our workshop on demand, you can reach out to us and help us build another workshop in the catalog. We'll be happy to help with that. We have the framework, we just need the content, basically. So that's it for me. These are all the links that you can find. I think my colleagues have put them in the Q&A, but you can also scan that QR code to get all these links in one page. You can join the Slack if you're with HPE. We have also a Slack on the internal HPE Slack, so feel free to join that one. And with that, thanks a lot, and let's get started with the real stuff.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining, and thanks Didier for asking us to be part of the Munch and Learn today. I'm Amber Graner, and I'm the open source evangelist and community manager for HPE Ezmeral Software. And with me today is Chase Christensen. Chase, you're on the Ezmeral team. Tell folks a little bit about what you do and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, before I even introduce kind of myself, those talks look great. So these meetup talks, that neural network talk is awesome. And that Podman talk is going to be pretty cool. So I'm definitely going to have to try to attend those. That's exciting. So my name is Chase Christensen. I'm a global field CTO around the Ezmeral solution. So my background actually began as a playtester in the Call of Duty video game. I decided that I hated manual testing, and I started in the infrastructure world, got into automation, got into Kubernetes, decided, hey, I want to kind of run Kubernetes for a purpose. Joined Aricto, where I started to really dive into open source and Kubeflow. And I've also done some consulting and work with like human in the loop kind of auto labeling companies as well. So I'm a huge fan of open source distributed systems and all things kind of machine learning, but ultimately trying to take away the mundane toil that people do day in and day out. That's kind of my passion, because I hate doing things more than once. I just want to automate them. So
Well, I think this is a interesting talk in that it's really about just that open source piece and why it's so important in this space. So let's look at how we're going to break this talk up and where we're going to go with it. So what is this talk about? This talk is about what is machine learning, because so often people loop or throw everything under the sun when it comes to machine learning and AI all into one big category, kind of like everybody calls everything the cloud, right? And so we want to kind of give that definition of how we're looking at it and where we're going to go from that. And then what is thought leadership and why is it significant to this ecosystem? What are some popular open source machine learning tools? And we're specifically going to look at a subset of the ones that are integrated into the HPE Ezmeral software and talk about we'll highlight the benefits of that. What are the benefits of open source machine learning, and how does thought leadership drive adoption and advancement in this space as well? And then we're going to challenge you to a call to action. So with that, Chase, you want to talk a little bit more about what machine learning is?
Yeah, I can do that. So machine learning, and this is like the robust definition that we get, right? This is the very cerebral machine learning. It's a subfield of artificial intelligence. But when I'm talking to a developer, or if I'm thinking as a developer, really all machine learning does is provide us a way to put patterns into our application that we don't have to manually figure out. Like normally, if I'm developing a GUI and I'm saying, well, hey, someone's going to click this button and I'm going to hard code that pattern. But with machine learning and AI, I have this training loop where I can actually keep making my application smarter to say, hey, when does it make sense to serve or to present something to my end user? And it has its own life cycle. So really think about it like you're giving your application a brain to make more interesting decisions based on kind of the data you've given it. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about machine learning and all these tools that help machine learning algorithms constantly retrain, just like you as a developer is constantly coming in and taking in that customer feedback and then saying, okay, what next? What can we improve on? Well, automating that data, the data pattern detection is really the goal of kind of the fundamental machine learning that you see most often out there.
Thanks, Chase. The other part of this talk is about what is thought leadership and what does it mean in this space. And so often we hear people throw out the terms thought leadership, and they throw it out in a way that's a marketing term, and just kind of use it as another marketing effort. But it's really more than that. And a thought leader and the thought leadership in this space is different from being a leader, like a people leader, and it's different than being an influencer. It's very specific in that person is specialized in their area, whatever their industry, community happens to be, and that there's someone that people turn to for guidance. And thought leaders, are really experts in a given space, and sometimes they've been around the space long enough to where they can be a generalist, a thought leadership as a general, like an open source in general, or they can narrow it down to a particular tool, in this case, some of the ML and AI tools. And the thing that sort of separates a thought leader apart from other influencers is a lot of influencers, they influence just on things that they might be interested in a moment, or a fleeting moment, or maybe somebody throws them enough money and they'll talk about that. But thought leaders really, their belief in their purpose and why they believe in what they do, it's firm, it's solid, it's not going to change. If you talk to them today, you talk to them 5 years from now, if they really believe in it, they're still going to be talking about it. And they love sharing their purpose. And that's one of the reasons that we're here today. Both Chase and I love sharing the things that we truly believe in. And for me, it's open source. And I've been in the open source community now for about 15 years. I got started in the Ubuntu community when my husband brought me a live CD back in the day and handed me this old laptop and said, look, most people don't have a kernel developer sitting in a living room. I'm not helping you. You go find the community, you go figure it out, and then you figure it out yourself. And so with that, I found the open source women's group, or the Ubuntu women's group, and then went from there, and later helped co-author 2 of the official Ubuntu books, helped launch Ubuntu User Magazine back in the day, all because I had an interest and a belief in the principles and philosophies around open source. And now I eat, drink, breathe, sleep open source and everything that I do. And I challenge people to get involved. And from there, I went to a company called Linaro, which is Linux on ARM, and helped architect their community. From there, I went to Open Compute and helped set up that membership model. I was the second person hired for Open Compute, so got all that set up. Then went on to the cybersecurity space, and then went to Aricto, and now I'm here with HPE. And so when you look at thought leaders in this space and those who are influencing it, it really is those people who influence the discussions, the contributions, and shape the future of these ecosystems. And the ecosystem that we're talking about today, and I'll say it a gazillion times, is this ML and AI ecosystem. And it's not about the HPE side of it or any other side of it. It's about the whole, and why open source is so important in this space and to developers, because I don't think there's a single framework, tool, platform out there in this space that doesn't have an element of open source attached to it. And I think that is just this amazing opportunity for anybody that wants to be involved, whether you're as an individual or as a company. It gives you the opportunity to do that. And speaking of thought leadership, last year at KubeCon in Detroit, Chase and one of our coworkers, Stefano, gave a really good talk, and we put the link to that talk in the slides, so you should have access to it after the talk, and it's available on YouTube. So we both Chase and I try to, what we believe in, no matter where we're at, no matter which company we're at, we try to always promote and get people involved in that, whatever it is. Like Chase is the ML side of, the ML developer support side of things, and I'm the open source principles and philosophies, and this is how you get involved kind of side of it. So that's where we're coming from today. It's not like we're coming from a marketing background. We're really coming from people who roll up their sleeves and get involved. And we don't ask anybody to do anything that we're not willing to learn and do ourselves, or that we haven't already done ourselves. So just know that that's where we're coming from on that.
Amber, did you want me to launch the little poll?
Sure, you can go ahead and launch that, and we'll keep it up for the next little while.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
you know, and Amber, I want to hop in on that too, because, you know, part of the talk that I gave, and part of kind of the point you're hammering home there, is that, you know, I when I first got started, I was in the infrastructure world, which means I was staring at like 32 racks of gear, and, you know, there's the storage, the switching, the compute. You know, everyone has their verticals, but part of thought leadership is really kind of quieting that, maybe the imposter syndrome that we can get in tech because of how deep that these stacks are and how quick these tools can come out. But saying, listen, I have a perspective, and my perspective might not necessarily be wrong. It might not just have been heard. And part of the DevOps and data science talk was, you know, you need many personas to get machine learning models and to run these open source communities. And right now you see all these different tools that we're about to discuss. You know, maybe if it's a data engineer, maybe it's a data scientist. But even if I'm a traditional developer and I'm thinking, you know, hey, listen, I just wrapped my head around Kubernetes and microservices, and now you're telling me I need to become a data scientist. Well, honestly, you don't, because someone still needs to keep these systems up. Someone still needs to be the reliability engineer. So it's really interesting. You hear all these people talking about, hey, here's an incredibly complex distributed training, but you might be an infrastructure guy that says, hey, what happens when something goes down? What happens when the network goes down? Hey, how can I make sure that I find the right, you know, sizing or instance for this? All of those perspectives and worldviews are incredibly important. And part of the whole thought leadership is being willing to get out there and have that perspective and bring it to the table. And I think that even looking at what Hack Shack is doing with, hey, if you're an SME, write a blog, or open source communities where they say, hey, if you think that if there's a gap, create a PR. Let's have a conversation. That's how we see things like Ray being brought into Kubeflow. So I think these conversations are really key to keeping these solutions viable for the business, as well as the communities healthy, for our skill sets that can grow beyond just our current orgs.
I agree 100%, Chase. And I think that as we look at some of these popular open source ML tools, these are just some of the ones that are integrated into Ezmeral. And you can see that, you know, these founders and these folks or these organizations that open these tools for the community, and the list is long right here, and you can go into those a little bit more here in a second, Chase. But, you know, they release these to the community, and they say, here, they're open, and they're usually on an Apache style license, or at least the ones that we use, which means in layman's terms, somebody has thrown it over the fence and they don't really care what you do with it as long as you give attribution, but they're trusting that they're giving it to you, and you, Mr. and Ms. User out there, are going to give back in some way. And we're going to talk about other ways that folks can give back other than code, because you don't have to write code to be a thought leader and be successful in this space. If you can write code and you can help improve that core product, then great. But there's so many other ways that people can get involved, because oftentimes you or the organization that you work for whatever reason, can't give that code right away. But there's other ways you can contribute. And so I just think it's super important that as we look at some of these, we realize that these open source projects, when they open it up and they give it to the world, they're establishing trust. And what we've seen in the past is when that trust is broken, these organizations change their licensing, and they change it to such a way that now you can't use it like you could before, because you didn't contribute back. You exploited those things. You eroded the trust that people gave. And I'm going to use the word trust a lot, because it's a cornerstone to what makes the open source relationships really work, because it's a give and take. There's these projects that give the code. There's these users, and both individuals and organizations, that take with the expectation that they should give back something at some point in time. And with that, Chase, do you want to kind of go through some of these tools and maybe at a high level explain why they work so well together, or maybe pick one of them and we can talk about some of the ways that's been integrated and the integrations inside of that community as well.
Yeah, that's I can absolutely do that. But I want to also continue that the concept of trust, we automate trust all the time as engineers, right? When you look at HTTPS and certs and service meshes and all those things, we know that we need to automate trust because you need to know that what you're building is secure, right? We talk about reliability. Well, that's another part of the world we're seeing today is, listen, is this project, if I spend all my developer time building on this project, how do I support it? Is it going to be real? Can I launch a product with it and not run into trouble? And I think that's what's so powerful about all these tools. And not only that, but hey, how long are these tools going to be supported? What's interesting here is we've got Spark and Ray, which are actually both two projects that came out of Rise Labs. But these are amazing projects, and Spark's a classic, with Hadoop clusters and data engineering. But then Ray is taking things to another level. That's saying, hey, well, now how do we further scale out Python and make things kind of independent? But then you start to look at all these different pieces and you say, well, listen, Kserve is great, but I can't run, if I want to just run Kserve, we know as developers it's exhausting to context swap. So something now even like Kubeflow is coming out, which is saying, hey, Kubeflow's concept is, what if we could take kind of these communities, all these individual communities, and provide kind of an integration, a way to plug them in together, so that when you think of how you and a data scientist and an MLE get work done, it's all within the context of a platform, even though these are these individual kind of open source projects, which is where you see the Kubernetes and these SDKs being involved. But the concept is part of joining the Kubeflow, and Amber can really talk about why things like the CNCF and Linux Foundation exist, is, hey, how can we ensure that when we contribute our community maybe to a greater project, that it's subject to kind of the community guidance and rules, so we know that there's longevity for it, and there's distributions and all those fun governance models around these, so people can create products, can provide value for their customers, and know that it's not going to get swept out from under them.
Yeah, it's very important, Chase. You bring up a really important piece of this. As you can see, with HP and the Esmeralda software, we're integrating on top of trademarks that we don't own. So it's very important that these communities stay healthy and that we don't do anything to upset that balance of trust. And so if you're on the call and you and your organization are doing the same thing, you're integrating you're integrating open source tooling into a solution that you sell, and you don't own those trademarks, then how do you ensure that community stays healthy? Well, if you're not participating, you don't have a say, because open source is not a democracy, it's a meritocracy. And so the more you give, the more say you have, the more trust you have. It's not like you just show up and say, hey, I need to be represented, but you've never contributed. And again, I'm not saying that it's code, it's everything. I have a list later in another slide, but it's that thought leadership. It's how are you helping that community grow? How are you helping spread the word? What are your skills? What are the people in your organization skills beyond writing code? And I think that it's super important that you realize you can't guarantee the health and well-being of a community that you don't participate in. And that, we've seen in TensorFlow not long ago, they changed their license. Elastic back in the day changed their license. The list goes on, right? And we've seen how even in the Kubeflow community, when MinIO changed their license, it introduced a whole bunch of CVEs because we couldn't get a hold of the new stuff. We were on the old. And now we're looking for an alternative for, MinIO in the community. So it's really important to participate and keep that trust factor in place. And in the Kubeflow community, we are, like Chase mentioned, we're working with Ray. We recently had a conversation with Spark. We have conversations with Bento and Mel and others to figure out how we can do that integration. K-Serve is one of our core components, even though they're a member of the Linux Foundation, their AI and data group. And so we're really looking to see and listen to the community on how we can improve Kubeflow as a platform and make it easier. So if you're integrating Kubeflow, maybe in the future, you're also getting the benefits of Ray and Spark and K-Serve and other third-party tools. So it's a one-stop place to integrate multiple tools rather than pulling from individual locations. And so we're really trying to make sure as we go forward that we do our part to ensure the health of the communities that we're integrating on top of. Or have we in the past? No, but we're looking at how we can do that. So I don't want anybody to say, oh, well, you don't do that now. I've only been at HP for a little while. I'm still new and I'm still learning. But one of the tenets is for me, like I'm heavily involved in Kubeflow, and then we'll start getting involved in some of these other communities as well. And last year, Kubeflow moved into the CNCF, and it was super important that we did that because we needed to be in a larger neutral environment so that it wasn't seen as just a Google shop. We needed to be in a place where others could sign the CLA because there were so many organizations that couldn't sign a Google CLA and contribute. So we had to move it to a neutral space in order to just get a neutral CLA. So more companies could start contributing, more individuals could start contributing. And that's just one example of why those organizations like the CNCF and the Linux Foundation and the Apache Foundation are so important. Chase, anything else to add to this slide before we go to the next one?
Yeah, and as we start kind of spin our wheels, there's towards the end, we're going to have a call to action. And as we start to spin our wheels, hey, maybe where can we add value? It's important to notice that Kubeflow is built off, it's the combination of Kubernetes and TensorFlow. And we all know how hard it is to run Kubernetes and how much expertise it takes to keep Kubernetes healthy. And maybe you're a TensorFlow person, but if you're saying, listen, I'm a really good Kubernetes person, and I want to maybe help machine learning engineers or data scientists understand like the operator controller pattern, that's super valuable. I just did a huge enablement for the organization internally around Kubeflow. And I started with that. I started with hey, listen, as you go up through maturity as an org, you need to understand the life cycle of the services underneath your platform. That's incredibly valuable. Or maybe you're a data scientist and you're saying, hey, listen, I don't want to think about that. And I want to make sure that Kubeflow has all the magic under the hood and my machine learning engineer or my platform team can help run it. But I want to bring in my feedback of, hey, I need to distribute my Python code. How easy was it for me to do that without a PhD in Kubernetes? The DevOps, MLOps community world is us having these ebb and flows in these conversations. So I think it's really important when we think about thought leadership. There's tons of little spots that you can fit in regardless of where your vertical is, your expertise is. And then we can learn from each other, which makes you incredibly valuable going to an org saying, hey, I've talked to machine learning engineers within the context of Kubeflow, but I'm a platform person. That's awesome. Right, having these conversations is super great. Instead of us just kind of staying in our lanes. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to contribute here.
So what are the benefits of open source machine learning? And those benefits on the left side there are just open source in general. There's transparency, there's flexibility, there's agility, the enhanced security piece of it, the cost efficiency, the scalability, the transformation piece of it, the whole open source community, and the extension of knowledge that you get. You attract great talent if you're you're using these tools, and you get to start small. You get to test these open source pieces and see if they're right for you. And the other thing that you get to do, especially in this space, is you get to be that catalyst for change. As I mentioned earlier, most of these frameworks and platforms in the ML and AI space, they have a component of open source to them. And if you're using them and you're in the community and you're helping in those communities, then you get to be that catalyst for change. You get to shape the future of where that particular project and tool goes. And maybe there's an integration if you're an organization and you're using it and you need a feature, or there's something that needs to be fixed, and it will help you and your organization. Then being part of it, you know the engineers and you know the maintainers, and you can talk to them and say, how hard would it be to implement this? And then you can work with them and get that feature implemented rather than just dropping it in and going, hey, we need this, but you're not offering any help. It's the equivalent of seeing an unknown number on your phone. You let it go to voicemail. If you're like me, like I see unknown, I wait and see who it is. And if you're not contributing and you're not participating in a community and you just do a drive-by, open an issue, hey, we need this, but you don't offer any feedback or you don't offer, hey, we can help implement this, it's the equivalent of going to voicemail. People will get to it when they get to it. And then, you know, it really accelerates the innovation and improves the quality of the code or the end product that you're working on, because the healthier you can keep the communities that you're integrating, the better your product becomes. And so there's a lot of benefits to participating in these communities where you're integrating on top of. And so just keep that in mind. I saw a question a minute ago. I just want to pause here for just a second and thank you for this question. It was one, and one, I don't want to get your last name wrong, but I appreciate this question. It says, about contributing to open source, my personal experience is that the amount of red tape discourages from doing that. And I think it's really sad when, you know, you butt up against red tape. And I would like, if you're still on the call, I'd like to know if that red tape is your internal red tape, or is it, you feel like it's red tape with the project itself. Most projects don't have a lot of red tape. They have their guidelines and you go sign their CLA and you can start, you know, contributing. Maybe you have to learn their style and that kind of stuff. But I would guess to say it's red tape internally. And we face a little bit of that too at HPE. And part of it is finding out what the checklist is and kind of champion that for your engineers. Like, I know on our side, some of our engineers said, hey, we want to contribute, but how do we do that as HPE? So I had to go get the checklist from our open source program office and go, how do we do this? And what are the steps? And then how do we clear legal and all of that? And if you can have a champion that can break it down, whatever your internal process is, really kind of dig into it, experience the pain of it, figure out how to cut through that red tape, and then kind of disseminate that information to engineers who want to get involved. That makes it a lot easier. So each individual engineer doesn't have to go figure it out on their own. So again, that's another way to get involved and help with, you know, contributing to those open source projects. If you're the person that has the cycles to go and figure out how to do it and then come back and help everybody do it. So Chase, thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think you're hitting on a really good point. And you know, someone like you, Amber, who has these soft skills, it's really easy to be able to talk, to have these conversations. But that's part of the community. Sometimes there is red tape, but one of the benefits you get to your career, if it's community red tape, is really trying to work with the community and understand and develop those skills of, hey, I have this idea, you know, I'm going to put it out there. I know it's going to be subject to kind of the community and review. Let's figure out what's the best way forward. And that can be really complicated. And sometimes it can feel like red tape, but it's really just being able to go out there and have that conversation and understand kind of what's the concept of, and what is the best path forward, and how do we decide on that, right? It could be, you know, what do we use to measure the best path forward, and how can I contribute? And that's why there's so many different ways to contribute beyond just code. There's contributing with, here's a way I might want to solve it from a user experience perspective. Maybe I'm not a coder, but hey, this is the problem I'm coming into. Hey, how can we solve this together? Maybe here's another tool that'll help integrate it and I can solve it. I think that there's a lot of huge value there beyond just the tech side. You know, that they say that those soft skills and those ability to communicate the value of a technical contribution is actually a higher accelerator of your career than just being able to write really great code. So I think you get a lot of different skills working within these communities. I also want to touch on, from an engineering standpoint and from a machine learning standpoint, you know, we talk about transparency and the fact that you can, before you have these kind of more soft skill oriented conversations, you can independently investigate this. You can pop open, I did this all the time with Kubeflow, where you'd pop it open, you could read the Go code, right? You can say, hey, why isn't this API call being made? You can go and read it and understand it, and then have some data to go defend it, which is really powerful, because that helps you be able to better support your system, better understand that system. And if this is a project like a Kubeflow, well, that knowledge of how the system's guts work, the anatomy of it, actually is bigger than just your current org. So say you go somewhere else that's running Kubeflow, or say you need to bring in more people to help you run your Kubeflow, you have that power of, hey, we have a project that's not just subject to just this one organization. And this transparency concept is actually getting even more robust, especially when we start to talk about ethical AI, and we start to talk about, hey, you need to not only be able to build a model, but you need to explain how a model got to where it is today and made a decision to handle protected class, to handle things like, if you're doing a fraud detection, or you're giving loans. These are the classic examples. So you need to not only understand how your system runs, but you need to understand that how the data goes through your system and then got to your model, and then your model responded to some business outcome. And that takes a village, but open source really helps you have, there's no hidden chapters from you. You can literally crack the code and say, hey, here's all my data. Here's what I used to train it. Here's kind of this is what we call lineage that got my model to make this decision and defend it, and then maybe retrain it or go from there. But you'd no longer have this kind of black box of, well, I can't defend this one option. You can get, potentially in a lot of trouble, whether with customers or with, governments, if you're doing some bad stuff with your model that's maybe impacting protected classes, or just affecting people's livelihood. So this transparency concept, you'll see more and more, especially as people really start to adopt machine learning. It's, hey, what's the risk of not being able to answer the whys, and how hard is it to be able to answer those whys and hows? I think open source, this is why we see Hugging Face out there. This is why we see all of these organizations saying, here's my model, you can read the parameters, you can understand it, and all these organizations out there saying, listen, model monitoring needs to maybe start from square one, and so you do need all these different tools. So it's a great use case for open source.
It really is. And Juan, thank you for the follow-up. I think I'm going to answer this generally, because I was right. It was internal red tape. So when you have internal red tape and you break it down, and it's really an education piece of, like, when powers that be go, oh, but if we contribute, we're helping our competitors. Well, the downside of not contributing is the technical debt that you incur, the engineering debt, because now you've got to maintain a fork forever. And if you're the sole maintainer and you leave, well, you just took that institutional knowledge with you. And the gap is wide. So when people understand that, they go, we can contribute this, and then upstream can maintain this change. And you have to figure out early on, when you do your roadmap, or as you're doing it at some point, where's the collaboration piece of it? Where do I need to contribute and collaborate, versus where do I need to differentiate, and where do I need to keep this, to myself? Because if it's something, and we saw this at Aricto around kale. Aricto maintained a fork of kale, and didn't necessarily, got busy with, being a startup, and didn't contribute that back. So it was such a great fork that when they looked at contributing it back, we would have to deprecate the entire repo that was public and just drop in a new repo, because the change was so great. And in the meantime, what happened was we had folks like HPE, like Canonical, like Toyota, like others, who actually took kale and created their own version of it. So if you're not contributing back, you run the risk of somebody else creating that better mousetrap and beating you to the punch. And then you're out here maintaining a fork forever, that may never get integrated, and it's technical debt. And you have to decide, the powers that be, do they want to carry that technical debt? And so I think when it comes to that, there's breaking down the red tape, and there's also educating the decision makers who may or may not have ever been personally involved in open source, or who may or may not have ever seen what happens when you don't participate, and what happens when an organization either changes out the base OS of a container image that now you can't use for whatever reason. Now you've got to rebase everything because they just switched it out on you, or that they've changed the license out completely. And now, unless you pay them, you're stuck with whatever version you had, and you're stuck fixing those CVEs, and you're stuck fixing everything going forward because you weren't part of the solution. You became part of the problem, and they felt like the trust is broken, and now we need to change our license so that nobody can use our stuff. So there's a vicious cycle going on there. So again, it's breaking down the red tape and figuring out how to educate the decision makers on what is the criteria for maintaining that fork versus contributing those changes upstream. And that's a longer discussion, and it can get sticky and dicey, but it all depends on what, what's the pieces that keep your lights on versus what's the pieces that in the long run keep your lights on. Because a flicker here and there is one thing, but if you're not maintaining helping maintain the health of a project, and that project goes away, then you now have a bigger problem than just what if this code helps my competitor. But that's part of the beauty of open source.
And that's the fear of lock-in, right? This is when I talk to a lot of customers. And Amber, I think that there's, as we chug through this, there maybe is a different talk you can do. And you've got this great talk about open source versus open core, right? And what the two differentiators are. But I think there's another topic that we need to really hit on quickly is there's so many different types of users in a community, and you want to make sure you're benefiting them all, because there's maybe a distribution who's like, listen, my value is creating a really stable system that different people can use to actually deliver value for their customers. But then there's also going to be people who maybe just run it internally already for their internal machine learning or developer platform, and they're contributing up because they use it day in and day out. They're not just giving a distribution and maybe helping people run it or automating it. So there's these kind of two different worlds, but they're all benefiting each other. So when it says, well, hey, if you contribute back, you're going to benefit your competitor, it's like, well, it goes the other way too. If your competitor contributes and makes an operator more stable, well, you get that benefit as well. Or if someone puts in a PR for a new feature, you get that benefit as well. Or the classic example is someone takes in and starts managing the CVEs. That's great. So this is kind of those soft skills of the curiosity that's like, okay, well, what's the risk of us not contributing back, right? And that's when you start to maybe have to be that thought leader and start to maybe manage up a little bit, or have someone like Amber help work and say, listen, these are really that risk analysis of not being part of the community and forking. Do you really want to spend the money supporting this and squashing CVEs? Because what I hear from customers all the time is I want to use the tools. I don't want to have to support and run the tools, which is why I'm doing open source, right? I want to be able to have all sorts of communities helping with stability. And instead of just trying to have an internal developer platform, then I'm spending, day in and day out wondering about the release and branching cycle and all the engineering discipline that comes with that. That's a lot to manage. And so you better be incredible, your internal fork better be generating a lot of revenue for you to justify handling all those man hours supporting it without the greater community.
Yeah, I think because there's two different eyes, there's one set that looks at the balance sheet at one level, and another like the OpEx versus CapEx and that whole thing, and where does this balance out at? They don't really see where it balances out, further up the sheet there. And so I think too that when people go, oh, I'm benefiting my competitor, that if you're not contributing, the more you contribute, the more you're seen as a thought leader. And those, when you see organizations that are synonymous with a project that they didn't start, that's because they've now contributed so much that not only is the individual contributor seen as this subject matter expert inside of that community, but the company they work for is now seen as synonymous with that tool. And when that happens, it doesn't matter about all the other distros of a particular tool. it matters that, oh, well, this person works for this company and they're the leaders in this space. We're going to go to them first because they've helped me when I had open source questions, and they didn't try to sell to me right away. They waited, and now I can't do it myself. They're the leaders in this group. I'm turning to them to help me for this managed solution that I want. And so you're also, there's that double-edged sword there. So I can see both sides of it, but again, my passion is open source and how do you get involved and how do you leverage it. So I'm always going to say, let's figure out a way to contribute where it makes sense, and it doesn't, and you don't give away the farm. Like there's always going to be something that you have to hold back because you do have, like every company out there has some special thing that's the game changer and the differentiator for them, but it's knowing where that is. That's important. So let's go on to the next slide. So I just put this here. I'm not going to read it all. I just wanted to have some resources for everybody in the slide deck who wants it. But how thought leadership drives adoption and advancement in this space is, and I'll just hit the highlights, is collaboration and innovation, accessibility and diversity, education and skill development. You're building your resume. You're building your, the way you gain knowledge, and by contributing to a new project, you're learning new skills and beefing up your resume or your CV. The standardization and interoperability piece of it, and this transparency and trust that's so important. You could read more on that in this slide, but I'm going to go on to the next slide as well. So with this, like we said, we want you to get involved, no matter whether you're at HP or whether you're with some other company, or you're just on the sidelines kind of looking in. I know last year when we were at Chase and I were at Open Data Science Conference, which I'll be at again this year at the end of the month. And we had so many data scientists that came up to us going, hey, we're hearing about open source. We've never personally been involved. How do I get involved? And I think I spent more time at the booth last year talking about how to get involved in open source than the actual product I was there to represent, because it was overwhelming, the questions that people had. And then there were data scientists that said, I don't want to write code. I don't want to be a developer. Okay, let's talk about all the ways you can get involved without writing code. And that was advocate for that particular thing that you're passionate about. Educate people, learn something, share something. If English isn't your second or English isn't your first language, help translate the documentation or translate a slide deck, or help share that knowledge. If you have a passion for graphics design, every project out there needs somebody to help create their icons, help create their new slide decks, help create their the infographics for their particular tool. You can also improve the UX and UI and report bugs and file issues. And maybe GitHub isn't in your flow of your workflow, but if you get involved in the community, you just reach out to somebody, they can help you get started, help you get your GitHub account set up, help you file that first issue, teach you about markdown and language and markup language. Are you working on the wiki? Are you working on the website? Depending on what you're doing. You can help organize meetups in your area. You can also, like I said, improve the documentation. If you're following the instructions and it's broken, note where it's broken, figure out if you know how to fix it, write how you fixed it, and then ask, help them update their documentation. And if you're really passionate about something, I tell people all the time, you don't have to know like how to write code, but if you understand something and you're using it and you think it's the greatest thing ever, then tell people about it. Tell people, oh, come get involved and be part of this great community and do these things, because every successful community has what's called the grand essentials. And that means people believe in that project. They have a hope for the future of that project by getting involved, and they have something to do. So the layman's terms, not around community, but just in general, is something to hope for, something to love, and something to do. And when you have all of those inside of a community, then you're touching all the bases, and people are excited about it, and they love what you're doing in the moment. They're getting involved and helping shape the future, and you're giving them something to do with their hands. Because if I join a community and there's nothing for me to do, then I go to a community where there is something for me to do. Same way with people in their jobs. If you're working and okay, you know what's going on, but you don't feel like you're really adding value, or you don't really have something to do that really excites you, chances are you're going to find something else to do, whether it's on a different team or whether it's, at a whole new company. So that same, grand essentials kind of applies to everything that you do. And so we want to challenge you, if you have a passion about something and you're interested in an open source project, or you or your organization is consuming a project, look at it, get involved, see where you can share your talents, and go forward with that. And if you want to know more about getting involved in open source, or if you want to know more about HP Esmeralda software, just give Chase or I either one a quick email. We'll help you find your way. Again, it doesn't have to be about HP stuff. It can be just about getting involved in open source in general. We'll help you out there as well. And I think we have one more question. Diddy, I'm not sure how much time do we have? A few more minutes?
We have a few more minutes to take questions if we have questions.
Yep, we've got one more. Chase, I'll let you kind of address this one. Manuel says, I'm concerned about the ethical uses of AI and how to promote them and stop the unethical from happening.
Yeah, I think that is Manuel, an incredibly valid concern. And I think that that's where we all come in as thought leaders and advocates. And the entire industry is trying to understand how to do this. In fact, I really encourage you to start to look at some of these maybe model monitoring sites as well, or tools, as well as look at even just an organization like Hugging Face and OpenAI's entire mission, which is there are a lot of ethical considerations with AI, but there's also, this is like any tool, right? There's also, you can make unethical software, right? You can make malicious software. I can create a bug, or I can create a CVE, that I use as an exploit. But this is so new that we are kind of in this uncertain and unknown world where it's saying, listen, we need to understand how to be transparent about our ethical AI. So I think having open source toolings where you are subject to any eyes that wish to see your code, any eyes that wish to understand your data, and be able to then have your model or your methods be explainable is going to be really critical for the future of AI, as well as when we start to think about, the human in the loop aspect of the AI, and then our internal biases and how that impacts outcomes. I think that this is an opportunity, especially if this is something that concerns you, to really dive into that world and look at things like model risk management and how to socialize this and be an advocate for it, whether it's internally in your organization or externally as a thought leader in a community. I think that that's a really great place to be.
I don't think we have any more questions unless anyone wants to post one in the next few minutes. I think that's all the questions. Didier, anything you want to add? Because I know the developer community and being involved is something near and dear to your
Yeah, I kind of like your last slide here on getting involved, and it reminded me that I wrote a 3-part blog on getting involved with Git and getting started very simply, maybe opening an issue and then getting more involved and up to a point where you can contribute back code. And so there's a 3-part article that I put the link in the chat, and we turned that into a workshop. So if you actually want to do it as with hands-on, we have that workshop. I put the link again, and it's a workshop that opens a ticket and then opens a pull request. So it's kind of funny. Once in a while, I'm copied to whoever asked for a pull request, so I can see those things coming up. So that's something you can try and get your hands on, on Git if you're not familiar with it yet.
I know when I was getting started, and I still make mistakes. I have to do a PR today in the Kubeflow community. And I think sometimes when you do stuff publicly, it's intimidating. And you can,
Sure.
but you learn, and as you make mistakes, you like in the open source way, there's a line that says, when you fail, take notes and then share those notes, because the failures are just as important as the successes. And I like to say, people don't, you either win or you you get better, you learn, you either win or learn. And that's from another community, but it's true. Like when you're getting involved, don't think it is as you have to leap tall buildings and know all these technical skills. Nobody is born with this information. There's not a single person that comes into this world knowing anything about GitHub. And there's those moments when or Git, depending on if you want to use the command line, but you learn, and you learn by you have an itch to scratch, you want to solve something, or you're trying to get involved and you need to learn how to do something. And there's always somebody somewhere in those communities that if you just take the time to ask, will help you, will get you over that little speed bump. And it's really interesting to go back and see, you don't know what you don't know until you get started, and then you contribute for the first time, whether that's opening an issue or answering something or helping fix documentation, whatever it happens to be. And then 5 years go by and you look back and you can't hardly remember that day where you were afraid to contribute. And I think that's an important step. It's just think about every time you learn something new. I know for me, like when I was learning to skydive or when I was learning to scuba dive, all those things were scary. And now it's like, I can't remember like, what it was like getting frozen in the door or afraid to, fall off the boat or whatever. So, in that equivalent is don't be afraid, just get out there and just do it. And the more you do, the more you learn. And then pretty soon, before you know it, if you're passionate about it, you become the subject matter expert, and then you'll be passing along that information. And that's what I hope. I hope that people, all of you on the call, have now like found, what your passion is, or maybe what area you want to contribute, or what you would like to help with, and then you go forth and do it. And then like a year from now, Didier is inviting you on here to talk about your experience, and you're now the subject matter expert.
Sounds like a good plan. Thank you, Amber. I have put up the last end of session poll. Thank you for providing some feedback to us. This is always helpful. And I think we got one more question that popped up in the meantime. Did you see the question from Carl, Amber, or?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I'm reading it right now. So not long ago, we were searching for an open source tool to do a certain complex task against commodity hardware and couldn't find one. We realized we had the internal bits which could be turned into this tool. But after I considered the challenges of deciding whether this was in fact proprietary HP, I gave up on the idea. Can you comment on being the first to post a new open source idea? When you're new, I know we only got a few minutes left, when you're trying to convince people that they should open source something, one of the things you really have to dig into is it a differentiator? Is it worth, can we contribute this? You got to dig into the licensing of that code. You've got to look into the security of the code. There's about 5 different things you got to really look at. And then if you look at all that and then present it, you're more likely to have a really good discussion. And it sounds like that's what you did. You looked into all the pieces, and sometimes you get told no, but sometimes you're too soon. Like being too soon is just as bad as being too late. It's because they're not ready for that. And so maybe that same idea, if you present it in a future time, it actually gets accepted. So I don't know whether it was just a matter of you being too soon, like HP wasn't ready to do that, and not knowing the history of whether or not it was what all it was involved. But always look at how something's licensed, what the goal of the tool that you're trying to open source is, and then what it's tied to, and what piece of the product it's tied to as well. And then who are you having to convince? And then realizing what's their knowledge on open source and the benefits of it. And it can often be standing alone, like you're standing alone, because people go, why would you want to do that? This is hard. Well, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And sometimes it's the hard things that make it worthwhile. And sometimes you just got to be willing to stand alone and believe that your idea is solid. And if somebody above you says no, you've done your best, and maybe you'll try it again in a different time. But don't be afraid to bring it up, and don't be afraid to ask about doing it and suggest it. I get told no a lot, but that still doesn't stop me from bringing new ideas to the table and offering what I believe in.
Yeah, Carl, there, reading into that too, there is a lot that it takes to open source something. And like Amber was saying, there's a lot of licensing and there's a lot of, but being able to, maybe you need to, maybe that laundry list that Amber gave you hadn't considered, knowing all those questions to ask and being able to ask them and answer them, even if it doesn't become open source, that's kind of the power of curiosity, and will make you an even better engineer, because then you can start to say, hey, is this something we can open source, or hey, what's the barriers, and you have discussions from there, because people might not know, and it can be overwhelming and discouraging. But in my mind, when something's hard or discouraging, that's when you should lean in, because that means that's the most valuable. Because how many people looked at that open door, like Amber's saying, from the airplane and said no? Well, sometimes you just got to take the leap and know that whatever happens, you're going to figure it out. So
thank you. I think we're gonna have to close. Thank you for these closing comments and encouraging words. And thank you, Amber and Chase, for the talk. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll talk to you next month. And bye-bye. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
everyone.